In the United States, we are over 7 million housing units shy of being enough to house our entire country. In California, I don't know what the exact number is, but I imagine it's about a million or 2 million, and that we've not built new housing stock over the last 15 years while our population has increased. Yet increasingly, our government has new laws making it harder and harder to rent units, encouraging those units to come off the market, making the situation worse. So where's this all leading to? Well, we're going to get into that. I'm Bill Gross, and this is my weekly real estate market update. Before we get into predicting the future, let's make sure we're clear and we know where we are. Now, what I always say is in an economy, the basics of economics are there's two parts that determine where an economy is. There's demand and supply. Demand, buyers are typically in real estate factored by interest rates, and supply, sellers by the number of homes on the market. Let's take a look at the data and see where we are today. As far as interest rates, we closed again this week slightly above 7%. Now, it's kind of a little hard to say, but we can say it's in the range of where it's been for the last year or so, year and a half. It's below the peaks of the fall of last year. Yeah, it's been rising a bit, and we got quickly above the 7% mark, and we've stayed there. So that's cooling off a little bit, the market, but it's certainly not causing it to stop. And so we still have a bit of a buyer's market overall, a seller's market overall. On the supply side, we continue to be just about, though slightly above last year's numbers, which are still the all-time record for a non-pandemic period. So either we're coming out of the pandemic period or we're slightly above last year's new norm. But either way, the inventory is so tight, housing prices cannot go down because there's not enough sellers who'd be left to sell the property to cut. So you can see we have about 468,000 homes on the market. Pre-pandemic levels were $750,000 to $800,000, 800,000 units. So we're about half of where we really need to be, or back to that time period. We are above the pandemic period, so those days are kind of over and behind us. We're now moving forward. Now, real estate is a very localized market, and in Los Angeles, our market remains a seller's market. There's different cities with different realities, but in LA, I use Altos Research, which is a great tool, and it shows that our market is about a 40, and they rank that as a seller's market, though it's kind of slight to the seller's side. It's not tremendously so. Where we've been about consistently over the last 6 or 7 months or so, slightly down from a 43, 42 seller down to a 40. One of the key stats I watch is per square foot, and you can see that's been rising again. The amount of money it costs to buy the average square foot in Los Angeles is $859. So it tells you that either people buying nicer properties and or per square foot homes are again on the march upwards, which is going to make, in the long run, housing more expensive. Okay, so let's review the news. There's always some good stuff in the news. One of the companies, if you follow me, that I love to point out their shortcomings, I guess you would say, is Zillow. One of the companies that came in and trashed the industry, promised to change it. And like most finance companies through Silicon Valley, doesn't pay any income taxes, seeks to destroy people who are local and turn us into a bunch of corporate zombies. Well, guess what? Zillow's being sued by a law firm on their own, separate from realtors being sued, separate from Zillow being included in that. The Zillow Group is being attacked by Bronstein, Gerwitz, and Grossman, a law firm, and what they're saying is that Zillow has misled their financial statements. And when you read it, it makes sense. What Zillow does is they sell leads to agents and say, well, when you sell it, you pay us a referral fee. But they book the referral fee when they place the lead, assuming the property is going to sell. Now, if you know Zillow's finances and numbers, you'll know that while in last year in the United States, maybe we had 4 million sales, overall that industry sold hundreds of millions of leads, about 200 million leads total. So about 1 in 50 leads ever really sell in the industry. I'm not sure what Zillow's numbers are exactly, but it's not a one-to-one. So clearly, there's some concern, some reasonable concern on the legitimacy of Zillow booking in income before they've made a sale. I don't do that. I put something in escrow. I don't say that I've sold the property. I say that it's pending and hopefully it's going to close. And then further, Zillow is continuing to undermine, I think, the American dream. The American dream was always buy your own home, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, white picket fence, your own lot, your backyard for your kids to play in, maybe a front yard for your dog to run around in. Zillow, I think, as one of the corporate zombie leaders, is really doing its best to undermine that in a lot of ways. Recently now, they have now put on rooms for rent. So forget about buying a house. We'll help you not even rent a house. We're going to have you rent a room. Not to say that renting rooms isn't important. It just shows where their focus is, right? Rather than helping customers achieve it, what realtors do all the time is we try to participate in our communities, help people get ahead, try to motivate people to buy houses and save houses and things. Zillow's like the opposite. Nah, it's okay. Be renting a room. Not to mention, in many cases, renting rooms are illegal. Violates many cases the lease. It violates many cases local laws, state laws, Airbnb laws, things like that. So again, and what these big companies have done, Zillow and Airbnb and Uber famously is they violate the law. They bully state and local governments until the state and local governments coordinate their effort. It takes 5 or 10 years. By then, these companies are worth billions of dollars, and then they start to play by the rules and enforce the competitors to do the same thing. So this is just another case, I think, of Zillow using its corporate might to bully state and local governments, and then also to help undermine the American dream. One of the other companies that I think is doing a really good job of helping to destroy finances, certainly California, is Blackstone. Now, Blackstone is the largest, I think, non-traditional asset manager in the world. They're a venture capital company. I'm sorry, they're an asset company that buys and sells assets and companies and unusual debts and such. And so now they're calling, if you watch the news, real estate a generational opportunity, which now this is the same thing that Grant Cardone said months ago. So Blackstone is, I think they're right. I do think that it's a generational opportunity. Anytime you have hard times in the market and companies losing property, that's the time to be buying for the long run. And I think that they're right with that. But what's funny is one of the generational opportunities for real estate is Blackstone, because Blackstone has bought property, promised the state of California, the UC system. It's interesting. They promised them 11.25% returns on our taxpayer money. And they've missed that number by how much? $560 million. So here's one of the wealthiest companies in the world that basically is underpaying the University of California's tax system, which means taxpayers in California. Why? Because they have real estate that really isn't worth what they bought it. And yet they're saying it's a generational opportunity to buy real estate, which is probably going to be, selling the real estate that they're holding on to or propping up. The whole thing is a real crooked cycle on one hand, and then on the other hand. So anyhow, as a taxpayer, we'd love to get our $560 million from Blackstone, but they're busy working on the next deal. And so my guess is that they'll just say sorry. And as long as they continue to give campaign donations to the party in power, they're going to continue to get more business, and we taxpayers will get short-sighted. Speaking of politicians and short-sighted, one of the things that drives housing prices is good jobs. When I grew up here in LA, one of the key things was aerospace and jobs in manufacturing. I lived in Inland Empire, where there were jobs in high technology companies as well. And in Northern California, it's been the case. Well, increasingly, those jobs got sent out to China. And there's been a push to bring back jobs here locally, which will create more jobs. You look at Arizona, Phoenix is booming because of all the tech companies building chip factories in Arizona. In Austin, Texas area, same thing. Business booming because of that. Well, what's our government do? Not to miss an opportunity, our idiot government, led by Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo, wants to double the size of Philippines chip industry. So they're going to take our money, and instead of building chip factories here in Los Angeles, or encouraging or financing or supporting, I used to work for one in the city of Santa Fe Springs. Instead of encouraging companies here in California building more chips, or San Diego or Orange County or wherever, we're going to take our taxpayer money and we're going to help the Philippines build their chips. If you wonder why American real estate in our area is struggling, particularly residential, industrial real estate, retail and industrial, it's because our economics are really backwards, and we're helping competing countries rather than helping ourselves. Speaking of working against us, one of the wealthiest people in the world, who lives the life of a king, and an attorney who basically has been a shark destroying small and mid-sized business in America to become one of the largest banks in America, Jamie Dimon, he says the Fed should hold off on cutting interest rates. Now, most buyers want lower rates so they can get a better payment on their mortgage. most people look at lowering inflation, lowering rates as a way to help stimulate their real estate. And I could get if Jamie Dimon just did his job. I mean, anybody ever who's been to a Chase lately, there's plenty that Jamie Dimon can do to create better service for customers at Chase branches. He doesn't need to go to Washington to tell government officials who are already incompetent what to do. But here he is telling them, oh, no, don't cut rates. Please, we like them high. We're making a lot of money. Why is that? Because the high rates are destroying small and medium banks, and Jamie Dimon and Chase is buying them for pennies on the dollar and becoming wealthier and wealthier at the expense of taxpayers. So again, this is a case where people aren't doing their job, and Chase Bank, which really underrepresents itself in mortgage lending, as big a bank as they are, they don't do that much mortgage lending. Instead of giving better service on mortgages or better branch service to those of us who save money at Chase or bank at Chase, how about a couple more ATMs or a couple more tellers when you wait in line? No. He's flying to Washington, I'm sure, on a corporate jet, staying in a 5-star restaurant with all kinds of help and staff people, telling other people what they should do for their job. I'd like to see Jamie Dimon do a little better job on running Chase Bank, a little less time helping other people with their job. Okay, positive news. You might say, hey, Bill, you're so negative on the market. There's a lot to be negative about. I got to tell you, I have a new hero. My new hero is Flash Shelton. I assume it's a nickname. He's a handyman in Los Angeles area. And he has a website, a YouTube channel called Outside the Box. And what he does is he is a counter to squatters. In fact, in one famous story, one thing he did was he moved in on the house on the squatter. He put up TV cameras and drove the squatter crazy to where the squatter moved out. And the part that was particularly aggravating was the squatter was not some poor, we often hear these stories that they're indigent and they need all kinds of help. Not true. In this case, it was the founder of Umani Burger. So this is an entrepreneur. And what's fascinating if you watch his channel is some of the people that he's able to chase out over time. Here it is. My interview with Adam Fleischman, Umani Burger founder. You should watch this. It's a fantastic video, but here's a guy who obviously has money and means, and he's taking advantage of the owner of the property who was a little slow mentally because she was in an automobile accident and had brain damage. So here's a guy who's literally should be shamed. And I think that's one of the things we're not doing is shaming some of the bad people in our economy. And this guy, Flash, is doing it, and it's Outside the Box with Flash as the YouTube channel. He does a couple things. On one case, he gets the owner who has a squatter to give him a lease. Then when the squatter's not there, he moves in. And when the police come, they can't kick him out because he has a lease. So he's squatting with the squatter. And then what he did in a couple cases was he put cameras and made a reality TV show of the squatter being there. And he had a group of people with him. He also is trained. He also has a carry permit with a gun to protect himself. But basically what he did was he did what squatters do, which is he harassed the squatters until they gave up and left. And like I said, this guy from Umani Burger's founder moved out, and these other people moved out. It's funny how they pay very expensive moving companies to move their items out of their house for people who otherwise you think, and you listen to them, they'll tell you they're indigent. So anyhow, check out Outside the Box with Flash. Really one of my heroes, and I think that I'd like to think that this is maybe a tide turning or a new tool in the hands of owners to get out bad tenants. That said, another example that I thought was great. Some good news this week on the tenant front especially. Here's one being reported by Eyewitness 7. Now, one of the things I've learned lately is that the regular news online sites, Zillow and Redfin and Bloomberg, they've all been co-opted by their advertisers. Now, ABC News, they just put on what they think people are going to watch as entertainment and then put it on the news site. So I find increasingly better news on those sites, just kind of FYI. Here's a case where Boyle Heights tenants protest the planned demolition and development of rent-stabilized properties. So what happens here? There's a property that has rent control. Rent stabilization is really rent control. It's a fancy name for it. And so what happens is over time you limit the rent. The owner is not going to put more capital improvement into a property where it has very little rent. And so he proposed, according to law, one way you can get people to move out is if you build other property the state wants. In this case, high density and low income affordable housing. So he proposed and something that met all the rules of that particular development in that area was a 52 unit project that included low-income housing. You go, wow, that's exactly what we need. More housing and 52 units instead of 5. So we have 47 more people. So that's great. Well, of course, the tenants who live there complain. They don't want to be forced to move out, even though the law provides for it. They don't want to move out, so they're protesting. Now, the reason I bring this up is you often see stories of developers where local neighbors who own property say, we don't want this project built. And the news always makes it sound like they're NIMBY, not in my backyard. Well, these people are wealthy. They own $1 million, $2 million homes, and they don't want affordable housing in their backyard. Here's people who live in rent control apartments. They don't want rent control apartments and low-income housing where they're built in accordance with law, and they're protesting. And of course, the news has to make me very sympathetic. Oh, poor tenants, they're being kicked out. Well, that's what the law says. The law provides they get really cheap housing for a period of time, and then the city or state benefit by replacing it with more dense housing as long as it meets a certain affordable level. So again, alligator tears for these tenants who are protesting in Boyle Heights. Okay, last today, how is your government going to help solve the affordable housing crisis problem? Well, here's a case where the Biden administration proposed $7.3 trillion of new spending last week. Including that package was $289 billion, $289 billion to build housing for the new visitors. I forget the term they use for people we used to call illegal immigrants. They come across the line illegally, and then now the government's giving them money and free medical care and free phones and flying them all over the place. And now, of course, cities are complaining there's no place to house them. And so the Biden administration is now offering $289 billion to house people from around the world while our homeless are on the streets and while our poor people don't have a place to live. So there you go. That's what your government's doing with your tax dollars. And always keep in mind, when these programs sound generous, they're just taking your money and giving to these people and calling it their program. Okay, what do you say? I think that's good news about the tenants, that project being built. I think it's good news that we have some pushback on squatters. So there's some good news this week. What do you see? Put your comments in, like it, don't like it, subscribe. I'd love to hear from you. I'm at Bill Gross Probate on social media. As always, make today your best day ever. Thanks so much.